My name's Robert Thomas. I joined the Navy, became part of it, and went to radar school, boot camp radar school. My first ship was the Cassin Young. I came across this gangway for the first time, and 1958. I served on the Cassin Young and through 1960 when it was decommissioned. I had a choice. Coming out of high school in a little town in Ohio, about going on to college or going into service. I couldn't make up my mind. I had an uncle that had been in the Navy that talked a lot about the Navy and influenced my decision. I got into the Navy on what they called a kiddie cruise. It was 3 years, a little plus 3 years, rather than 4, okay. And which was an incentive. But I knew after I'd been in the Navy 3 years, I didn't want to stay in the Navy. My first cruise was 2 days after I came on. I'd never been out on the ocean. I remember coming aboard, I was a real novice. So some of the old salts were 25 years old. Took me around and showed me the bullet holes in the ship to indoctrinate me and what it took to be a member of this crew. Went to the Mediterranean. First home port was Naples, I can remember that. I had a set of dress whites on to visit the port of Naples, my first time over in a foreign country. Okay. We walked off the ship, and 2 minutes later I got hit in the back with a tomato.
Who threw it?
Yeah, a little kid that wanted cigarettes, and we didn't give them to him. So I was an indoctrination into international protocol. But it was, being on the ship was an interesting experience from beginning to end. So I was in Combat Information Center. We were in constant dialogue with the bridge. And we would be telling the bridge directions and from the radar screens, bogies, and other ships that were in the vicinity. And we did quite a bit of navigation, like we'd go into ports. So we'd be telling the bridge which way to steer. Berthing, you had to be close. I actually saw my bunk today. I was the last person in that bunk when it was decommissioned, which was a great experience. Every so often I slept in the rear in the bunk and aft of the ship. And I can remember to this day, when it got rough, you'd hear the propellers come out of the water, make a tremendous thrashing, and then go back in. It got that rough. Unfortunately, if you couldn't get over seasickness, you were in trouble on this ship, because I was usually seasick for 2 days after we took off from any place. And then I acclimated to the conditions. Food wasn't bad, I can remember. It was all dried food, most of it. Potatoes were dried, everything was all right. But fortunately, when I was aboard, I think we had some pretty good cooks. What I really remember about the food is that the galley was close to the radar room or the CIC, and when you'd have a midnight shift, you go past the galley and they were baking, and they'd have fresh rolls, which you usually would snitch about a dozen. But I couldn't complain. I couldn't eat potatoes after I left, but free time, most of the time, was spent in the mess deck. We'd have movies, which we'd trade with other ships. I was an enlisted man, so I was restricted to everything but the chief's quarters, the ward room for the officers, and the officers' mess. I saw those for the first time today. I can remember we highline with carriers to get food or movies and fuel. We take on diesel fuel from carriers or other ships, and they bring it over in big pipes and hook it into the side of this ship and pump it over. One time one of those pipes broke, and this whole ship was covered with fuel oil. And I remember the captain saying, "There's no executive officers on this board. There's only enlisted people," and everybody got rags and cleaned up the ship. I can remember a commander came aboard and but he went straight to the wardroom, and the ceremony and presentation was in the wardroom. I think it was very rough. The crew, enlisted people, didn't see much of that. They knew what was happening. We also had a disincentive because we had to have an inspection that day.
Okay.
Of that commander. So we got I remember standing out here on the deck for an inspection, which we failed. We got the E for excellence, but we failed the inspection. When it first was announced that we were going to be decommissioned, and most of the crew, I think, knew that a week or so ahead. Yeah, it was a pretty sad affair. I mean, this ship had been around World War II, and it had gotten combat and so forth. I mean, it was a bad feeling. One of my recollections was the decommissioning of the ship. We were bringing the ship down from through Cape Hatteras, and there were some very bad storms. We were with a sister ship. The sister ship lost 5 people overboard, and we eventually got into Norfolk, where the ship was decommissioned. At decommissioning, the day we had to get this ship prepared, the rule was this ship needed to go into mothballs and prepared, or you didn't go on leave. So there was an incentive
to get it done.
To get it done, and people rallied to that incentive, even to the fact that a lot of things went overboard that shouldn't have. I was in the Navy 2 years after that. I went aboard another destroyer, went right back over to the Mediterranean. I went down to Gitmo, and then over to the Mediterranean again. And for 3 years of service, 4 years almost, of service, I saw a lot of the world. It was my introduction to the real world. I came out of a small town. I went to boot camp. I went to school, and my first introduction to something where I had to work and be a part of a team was here. And that made a difference in the rest of my life. It's amazing. When I came aboard this ship, I was 19. This ship was 17 years old. And the experiences this ship had compared to what I had were astronomical. I mean, it went through kamikaze raids and everything else in its 17 years. And all I did was grow up to be 19 in those years. So it's just amazing that what has happened here, that people kept care of this, was resurrected. I understand there's only 3 of these left in the world, so to have young people be able to go aboard and see what it's like is really, really special.